Hello everyone and welcome to this podcast for the Light View with me, Chris Fordham. Today in our Light Creator series we meet one of the directors of HargenHinderdael, Sofia Hagen, who runs the company along with her business partner Lisa Hinderdael. This creative practice merged recycled materials with traditional craftsmanship. They produce furniture and lighting with the ethos of a circular economy in mind by merging recycled materials with traditional craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology. And it's a company that really thinks outside the box, who probably would then take that box and turn it into a light fitting or a piece of furniture or time-travelling device. Sophia, great to see you. Hello.
Hello, great to see you
Hello.
too.
So I think if I remember correctly, we first met when you were working at Zaha Hadid more years ago than I care to mention for a project in Napoli. So what have you been up to since and what drove you to start this company? I mean, it really blends the boundaries of art with design, but with sustainability aspect, it must be quite tough.
Well, I have been up to a lot since, because I think I studied with Zaha Hadid in Vienna, right? I studied architecture originally, and then came to London in 2008, and I was working in her studio for about 3 years, then left and toured around smaller architecture practices in London, smaller and bigger. I was also at Heatherwick at some point, Make. Then I was design director at Design House Liberty, and that's where I met Lisa. And this is also the company where I started getting more into different scale. So not just large scale architecture, but interior design, installations, also lighting and product design. So we always designed our own light fittings and bespoke lights for the projects we did, apart from furniture pieces. And I think I really found a lighting, good Freudian slip, right? I really found a liking in, being a bit of a more interdisciplinary studio rather than just architecture or just interiors. And around end of 2019, I decided I really want to cut myself off the architecture realm as such, or maybe you never know, I might go back, but quit um, quite on an impulse because I was design director.
Blimey.
Yeah, I couldn't have been working on the side. It was just impossible. I kept commuting to China and Hong Kong like every month, running projects there. So
That's
yeah,
not a commute. It's not an easy commute, is it? I complain about my commute and I don't leave the home.
I know, right? The commute to the kitchen is hard enough as it is. I guess you get
Exactly.
yeah. And then I started because I did want to, a smaller scale can also have an impact. And I think I was more interested in the research side of things as well as a part as doing pretty things. Although my background from my training, basically, by Zaha is obviously very formal, complex geometries, so shapes definitely do matter. But I always thought it's not enough to just, make a pretty light. There should be more behind it. And I think also my background coming from the west of Austria at the Swiss border, passive houses existed there like 30 years before they came up in the UK. And sustainability is a really, really big topic there. Everyone's much more eco-conscious. So it's probably ingrained within my mentality and culture anyway. And yeah, it was basically the combo of starting something new and afresh, but it needs to have a purpose other than just being a pretty face. So the purpose was getting into in-depth material research. How can we upcycle? What can we use? And how can we fabricate it? Which is a very, very big factor in our studio because we started in 2020, then COVID hit pretty soon. Most manufacturers' workshops were closed as everything was in the world, but robots could work. So the 3D printing just basically lent itself to it as a technology. And it's also actually much more sustainable and efficient than traditional manufacturing techniques because you only use what you need. There's a lot of upcycling in terms of the materials that can be used. a lot of waste that can be turned into filament, and then obviously the way it's made. So I really went far now, right? With my reply.
No, but it's not. It's nice to hear that, and it's interesting to hear that your culture drove your sustainability as well. Because, I
Mhm.
mean, obviously, you need to sell these things to the world,
Yeah.
and you're making a rod for your own back for something because it is quite tough. Does the form follow the function in some respect? Or it can
Um,
be what it wants, can't it? With 3D printing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they go hand in hand. So usually our forms are very sculptural, as you know, and most of our products are commissions. So we work closely. A lot of property developers are our clients, and in Austria, a lot of corporations who want like a bespoke range for them with a certain material that fits the brief of the development, their new building, their headquarters, or their public realm intervention. And we often that's where the architect comes in. We often do our research first in terms of what's the context, and this is what drives the form. And we already know it will have to be a bench or a light or a stool or a planter, etc. So that's anyway a given that there will be, people will have to be able to sit on it. But the shape is formed by its context, like an architect would do, really. Yeah.
That's interesting. But I mean, when you first told me about your cocoon product, it did make me question my insanity because the process seems so far-fetched. I mean, if you told me it's made from sawdust, right? I mean, how does that even work? I mean, I see you've got a fairly new floor table lamp called Bolla, made from concrete mixed with recycled plastic. And what's the story there? Is that 3D printing as well?
No,
Or
Bola was made before COVID, so that was still handmade.
ah,
Yeah, Bola was the very first before we knew we organically fell into this robotic fabrication realm and niche, basically. We carved it out for ourselves as we went along. Because once you're in that network, you start meeting more people, and it really lends itself to my skill set and training of very complex 3D modeling, because the robot can do it, right? And it's just fun to create forms that you can't make by hand. Bola was a pain to make by hand. So sadly, I mean, we didn't make it, but the supplier, they now moved on. They don't do small scale anymore. So the next, we only have two bolas left. They go to the highest bidder. They're currently on display at the Austrian Cultural Forum.
oh.
Yeah,
Slide that in, get your pictures in, get your sales in.
please, please DM me for for purchase. But we want to the next series of Bola basically would be 3D printed clay because it's been modeled before, so it's anyway it comes from a 3D model and then you know found its way into being made the physical realm.
But
Yeah.
the sawdust thing really interests me because it just seems impossible. If you say you can 3D print sawdust, I mean it's mental, isn't it? It's crazy. I don't know how does it even start? I mean, is this a technology that's been around for a long time?
Yeah,
Because I
it's
hadn't really come
very
across
new.
it before.
So the thing is, it's done differently than most other pieces we have. So there's you can either use the additive manufacturing in terms of the robot literally spits out the filament or pellets and layer by layer by layer. And depending on the material, you have a certain thickness. Like concrete is always quite big and rough. Recycled plastic or sugar is quite a fine print. It depends on the nozzle as well, but also on the material you use. And sawdust, the way we made it, we came across this company called Forest based in the US just through reading articles, basically. And we're like, that was a completely self initiated project because we were excited about it. And we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. They literally print with sawdust powder from carpentry and construction site waste. And then it's bound with lignin. So there's no chemicals, resins, or glues. And
Cool.
they source the powder.
Eco-friendly.
Yeah. And all biodegradable, completely organic. And so they
It's
source
magic.
magic, basically magic.
It's
Yeah,
magic.
that's all I can say. But they once they source the sawdust and they obviously have to filter it. It's quite a fine powder. It's made in a the technology is called jet binding. So it has existed for a while, like it was used with different powders like gypsum or etc. You have a print bed and then it's glued together from within. It's like sintered. And then you excavate the whole thing, get rid of the powder, and you have it. So cocoon is made like that. You can also use different kind of waste materials, waste powders, but we're working on that for our next project. So that's still all in development, and I'm not going to give it away just yet until it's out. But it's quite a young, new company. They also, because they were a
Cool.
startup, eventually got bought. It all stopped. They founded a new one, so they're back running again under a different name. This is the joys of working with, innovation and startup culture. Things go like this. Nothing is actually really properly established. There's a lot of investment and different kinds of fundings involved. So it's very much like we're on at the brink of innovation here. So things can, it's very experimental very often. And yeah.
That drive, I guess, does that drive your process? Because I'm really interested in, I mean, you described the manufacturing process very well there. Does that drive the aesthetic and finish? But I was thinking probably just because everything's on the computer and your background was RD, she was very famous for her sculptural buildings, wasn't she?
Mhm.
So do you use, when you're setting out on your design, do you look to the product itself, the manufacturing process to drive the aesthetic, or you're trying to replicate what's already there? Because it would be easy
Um,
to replicate, wouldn't it? Be something that's already there, or do you strive to design them in such a way that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference? What's your approach,
I mean,
your design approach,
replicate in terms of, um, you mean objects that exist
aesthetic?
or aesthetic? No, I mean,
Yeah,
it's all,
just for lighting, for aesthetic and
yeah.
finish. Because you could quite easily say, I'm going to make a light that looks like everything else, and it would have the sustainability and everything else with it, so people would buy it. Or do you set out to say, which is a braver approach, I suppose, to say, we're going to do something completely off the wall, something completely different, which the manufacturing process and the material allows?
The latter, definitely. Yeah. So
Really?
because we
That's
like,
quite brave.
in terms of the technology that's used, I mean, Cocoon was the world's first 3D printed sawdust light. There's no other that exists. The only
Blimey.
pieces that have been made were with the designer Yves Behar, who's based in San Francisco, and there were little bowls and accessories. And then they made some partitions or things like in-house, but this is the first light that's been made like that. And it is, I mean, in the end of the day, it's a lamp shade, right? But the electrical, the organism is all fitted
Cool.
within. Yeah, so it wasn't easy to design and develop and make. And yeah, I don't think we would do something that we wouldn't replicate because it's also when you have those technologies at hand and want to work with them, you want to push the boundaries. It's just part of the ethos behind what we do, everything we
Ah,
do.
what is you're making a rod for your own back, but it's a nice journey, isn't it? I'm sure you're quite stressed with that because it'd be easy just to say, I'm going to do your sustainable product. It sort of looks like what you've got, but it's got really good sustainability credentials. But what you're doing is just one step further. You're saying, I'm going to make you a sustainable light, and the aesthetic's going to be slightly different to anything you've ever
Yeah.
seen before, and it's going to fit with the ethos of your building or whatever. So, hats off to you. That's a very English expression. But I do have a hat, so I can say that, right?
You're not wearing a
So
hat today.
no, I can't for the podcast. People think I'm weirder. But finally, if you had any advice for anyone starting manufacturing their own sustainable lights, I mean, you're the first. I didn't realise that you're the first. What would it be? And is there any support from the government? Because it seems like this sort of thing is something that the government should really be um, involved in to try and help with the sustainability that is important to all of us.
I mean, the only support is R&D claims, which you have to do yourself when you do your end of year accounts. That's very bureaucratic now, what I'm saying, but it's true. So we do get, tax refunds So because most of our products are very, very research development driven, and you can, with the right accountant and accountancy team, work on that, but it's not like we haven't found any support as such yet from the government. Maybe we haven't been looking hard
Boom.
enough. So good call. We'll research, but it's not obvious, definitely. Um, I mean, advice, it's funny because we started, quite on an impulse. There was no plan that we're really what we're going to do. We just did it like, I mean, just quit your job on a whim without actually having projects or clients, and then start from scratch, blank canvas, after being an architect to now do products and actually do them all with robotic fabrication and different materials that haven't been used before or are still in development. So it's all very maverick. That's why it's probably not a very sensible approach, but it's more exciting. And
But fun.
yeah,
Not sensible, but fun.
I also recently, a friend of mine is the main investor in Spotify, Klarna, and like I know a lot of people from the tech realm, like venture capitalists, entrepreneurs. They all have the same kind of, I don't want to say insanity, but there's this thing in common that we all have of just taking a risk. And if you don't do it, it's just not going to happen. You just have to do it and go for it.
Gosh, I think, Sophia, that is an excellent way to finish. Thanks so much. Thanks for it's been very interesting. I
Yeah,
guess your advice for anyone wanting to start this is make sure you've got very. I'm trying to think how I can phrase this politely. A strong backbone in order to start on this sort of adventure. So, uh,
yeah.
thanks to you, and thanks to you
Thank,
all for tuning in. Be sure to share and like. See you all soon, and don't forget, we're your voice.
thank you.